welcome to the first series of our interview. My name is Abdulkadir Fasasi, the ThinkEdge founder, and today with me I have a top talent on OAU campus, a second year student of Economics at Obafemi University, who will be talking about debt distress and how it is affecting the periphery economy. And today we'll also share more about his finance journey on campus and how he has been able to balance his academic life with also his professional life. So David, kindly introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is David Odukoya. I'm a part student of Economies Department of Obafemi University, and I'm really glad to be here.
All right, so I came with a lot of questions today because the person I have with me is a top talent. So we'll be analyzing so many things as regards this subject matter. So the first question here is, what do you think are the root causes of debt distress in developing countries? So when I say developing countries, it is not solely about the sub-Saharan Africa that we are all familiar with. We have some other countries in other continents, for example, now South Asia and Latin America that are also facing issues as regards their debt distress. So what do you think are the root causes of this debt distress in these countries?
All right, so that's a good question. The debt distress that is faced by all the countries that you actually mentioned, it stems from a number of factors. And those factors they focus on mostly historical, economic, and policy related kind of factors. For the historical, we can think of mostly like the sub-Saharan African countries that you said. Majority of them were, if we look at it, majority of the developing countries were colonies. So they were sort of engineered, if I can use that word, to export raw materials to the developing countries, which we refer to as the core countries like the US and co. And when they were engineered in that kind of way, the core countries imported manufactured commodities to them, basically. So it's almost as if the developing countries were made to always export raw materials and always import industrialized and manufactured commodities. So, and we know that in the global market, in the trade, basically, primary products don't exactly carry like a really high price compared to manufactured commodities. So because of that trade imbalance, they had to borrow. By the time they even got their independence, they had to borrow. And from borrowing, we can see how that whole situation started. But that's just for historical. Apart from the whole historical issue, we have a situation of currency devaluation. We know that majority of these colonies, or should I say since they're independent now, majority of these countries, they export primary products like crude oil. For Nigeria now, it's mostly crude oil. For Zambia, it was copper. And then majority of these primary products, they don't exactly carry a serious price in the global market compared to all this technology from US, from Japan, and the rest like that. So because of that, by the time the exchange rates get to a point, the exchange rates, they might borrow money from the US, probably in dollars, right? Maybe when they borrowed, it was $1 to probably it was $1 to 1,000 naira. By the time they are going to pay back because of that whole currency devaluation and stuff, depreciation basically, they'll probably be paying, maybe it will now become $1 to 1,700 naira. And then now they are going to be spending more to pay back that particular debt. So it becomes a kind of issue. And also the whole problem of primary products. Majority of these countries, they focus all their energy on just one commodity. For Zambia now, I know that theirs is copper. So when copper even crashed in, I think, 2010 or so, they had a problem because it's almost as if they can't make enough money as they could make because the prices of just that one product crashed. So since they focus on just one primary product, if anything happens to the price of that product, probably a price fluctuation or something, everything just goes down basically. So all these kind of issues just sort of puts them in a problem. So the last one now, which is a bit controversial, is IMF bailouts. That's structural adjustment programs, SAPs basically. They are sort of like loans that are given to countries that are in debt distress. So just to help them, they are in a really tight situation just to basically help them. So the interest rate on these loans naturally is usually lower than what you can find in the international market when you want to borrow. But they also come with certain conditions. And it is in those conditions that there's a problem. Because one of the conditions is austerity measures. Austerity measures just simply means that I'm giving you this amount, I'm loaning you this amount, but I want you to reduce your spending, basically. And when you ask a government to reduce its spending, it means it's not going to be pumping money into the economy. And we have a kind of situation that we end up in a kind of recession economic slowdown because they can't put money in the economy. Another thing is that they usually ask them to devalue their currency, basically. And when you devalue your currency, yes, exports become cheaper, but imports also become more expensive. And if it is a kind of country that relies on importation, you see that they're in a kind of issue, basically. And then another one that they ask them to do is also trade liberalization. That is, they should remove every form of trade barrier. The IMF is basically big on trade, exchange rates, and those kind of things. So when they ask them to remove every form of trade barriers, it's not exactly banning itself, but if there are infant industries in that country, they are going to be in problems because then they cannot compete with commodities coming from foreign markets. So those kind of issues just put these developing countries in a kind of tight schedule between the frying pan and the fire, that kind of thing.
Wow, that's a good one from David. So, from all what you have said now, we can deduce that when a country borrow, when the dollar rate to their country's
Yeah,
currency is somehow favorable, and during the time of payment, it is not favorable
yeah, that
anymore.
goes
And
up.
also, when a country relies on a sole exports,
Yeah,
for example, now Nigeria relying on crude oil only and not diversifying the economy,
yeah.
and some other countries too. So we have come into conclusion that these are the issues facing these countries. So how best can we mitigate these issues of debt distress in these countries?
All right, so it's usually said that it's easier said than done, right? Those
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah,
issues,
yeah.
but we can just basically just give them maybe like should I say solutions that they can just think about. One thing, of course, is to diversify basically, because if your country focuses on just one product, it's probably reasonable to start thinking about other commodities that you can produce, and instead of it being primary products, start thinking of stuff like in the tech, in marketing and those kind, in manufacturing and the rest. So if the country can diversify its economy, prevents itself from being dependent on just one commodity, even if there's a fluctuation in price of one commodity, it won't have an impact on them as it did on Zambia. The same thing also happened with Sri Lanka during COVID-19. They relied on tourism, but COVID-19, nobody was traveling, right? Everybody
Yes,
stopped.
yes.
So the whole tourism market just collapsed and they had an issue basically with their own debt and this thing. And so that's one thing. They should diversify the economy. Another thing that they can start thinking about is fiscal discipline. When the government wants to spend money, they should make sure they are spending money on something that is reasonable. Like the example of Sri Lanka that I made mention of earlier, they invest. One of the issue that made them owe so much was they borrowed money from China. I think around $1 billion, and they used it to build a port. I've forgotten the name of the port, I think, but I can't really pronounce it. They invested money in the port, but the construction of the port was not based on economic this thing. It was more of political. So the whole port was when they were making projections about the revenue that the port would bring, it was unrealistic basically. So by the time they built the port, it didn't bring in revenue. There was no traffic, no shipping traffic, no kind of. So the revenue was not coming in. And then it became a problem for them to pay China the money back. So eventually China collected there was an agreement and then China now owns the port for 99 years, that kind of arrangement. So it would be better if when governments want to spend money on something, they are sure of what they are spending their money on. It is based on economic decisions, analysis, not just political or that kind of situation you get. So apart from them diversifying their economy, ensuring stricter fiscal discipline and those kind of things, countries should involve in debt restructuring and negotiation. Like they know they're already in this amount, and then they're probably they're already in an issue, a tight corner to pay the amount. They can go to those countries that they owe money and just renegotiate the terms. Like Ghana now, Ghana renegotiated their $30 billion debts. They renegotiated it. You can renegotiate your debts to probably for longer terms, lower interest rates. And if the country is even generous enough, probably for debt forgiveness, they should forgive the entire debt this thing. But basically, if they can engage in all this negotiation and restructuring process, it will make the debt to still be there, sure, but it will make the pressure a little bit like reduced.
All right, so that's a good one from David, if I must say. That's well researched. So, moving to the next one, which also happens to be the last one. So, what are the potential consequences of this debt distress and the global financial stability as regards the debt distress, and how can they be mitigated?
Yeah, so if the whole thing is that if a country defaults on its debts, basically. Maybe like I think there was a point when Ghana in their issued euro bonds. Euro bonds are bonds that are just issued in the international markets in another currency. In that kind of situation, if Ghana were to default on its currency, what do you think investors would do? Investors will take out their money, right?
Sure.
And in that kind of situation, it has a contagion effect. Imagine maybe a country like Ghana, maybe Nigeria as well, also issued euro bonds. Immediately Ghana defaulted in its own and the bondholders lost. An investor that, if I was an investor and I had money in Nigeria's euro bonds, I would take out my own money as well. So it's created that kind of contagion effect where investors no longer trust the market. I know that when investors don't trust the financial markets, financial stability is in trouble.
Basically what happened in 2008.
Yeah, with the financial crisis, right? Yeah, so that kind of issue. And another thing is that when a country also defaults on its debts, it will make it difficult for it to get around this thing. So the flow of capital from one country to another country, there's a problem there because since it has defaulted, it may not even be the country that defaulted. It may be maybe a sister country, like the mention I made of Nigeria and Ghana. Probably Ghana defaulted. By the time Nigeria is probably trying to raise loan or something, investors will not be able to, they will not give out money, or the countries will probably not give out money. So this kind of thing can lead to a slowdown in the global financial stability. And the solution to it is basically just like the solutions I said earlier about diversifying the economy, basically just to reduce anything that can make you default on your debts, so you can ensure that you pay up and you retain countries, the trust in countries and the trust in investors as well. Thank you.
So it has been a great ride with David. He has been able to analyze some issues regarding this debt distress in African economies and also some countries in other parts of the world. So basically, it was so big on all these economies diversifying their productions, their exports, and also um, avoiding the financial contagion that can affect other economies that are very close to them. So we have to just like see what these international institutions are putting in place to ensure that there is security for these developing economies that are struggling with their debt distress. All right, it has been a great ride with David. So thank you so much for honoring this invitation and for sharing your insights as regards what is going on in the world. And to our viewers, kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel and be on the lookout for more interview series. So thank you.